Welcome to the Heaven on Earth podcast, a world where you study the story you were born into and redesign it into the story you choose. A world where you can have heaven on earth right here, right now, no matter the past. For me, heaven on earth is a holistic experience, leading with the heart, engaging with mind, body, and spirit. It's mindful, fostering calm and secure attachments. As we rise into consciousness, it's an earthly journey where we sensually embrace dynamic living.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Heaven on Earth podcast. This is going to be a so special in so many ways podcast for me because of who I have in front of me, Luisa Montero-Diaz, a friend, a love story, a friendship that has lasted decades. But first, before I introduce Luisa, I'm going to say a little bit about the podcast. I'm Claudia Cauterucci. I am the host. I am a psychotherapist here in Washington, D.C. for 25 years. I'm the creator of the Dynamic Re-Evolution curriculum. I'm an empath leader, and I'm a Heaven on Earth coach. And we're life traveling together. And one of the points I always make on this podcast is that this is not a religious podcast, even though it sounds like one. But we do like talking about the unseen and the sacred and how we live our lives in a heaven on earth way. And what that means to me is that we learn how to traumarize, that we're not living in constant survival because we've healed. And we know that when we heal ourselves, we heal the planet. It ripples out. So we live from a calm central nervous system. We're going to talk a lot about that today, how to be in our bodies, how to feel embodied, and how to form and maintain secure attachments. So it is psycho-spiritual, what we talk about here. And the way that I like to do it, and Luisa, you and I talked about this, is we put a topic on the table and we approach it from multiple angles. So let me jump right in. Welcome, Luisa Montero-Diaz. And we have a love story and a friendship story because Luisa and I have known each other since the 90s through different iterations. When I first met Luisa, I had just moved back from Guatemala, and Luisa was my boss. And it was amazing. We were such amazing workers together. But really, what began to happen was our conversations and our conversations about life, love, friendship, and spirituality, and how joined we were in this path of finding healing and deeper meaning, right, Luisa? And deeper meaning in life. And really, it has been the constant thread that has kept us together, even though we both have taken different paths since that first international consulting firm that we were both a part of. My career took a real pivot when I became a clinical psychotherapist. But throughout it all, what has woven us together has been this commitment to the inner journey and how to live here on planet Earth. So let me say a few things about you. I know I'm talking a lot, but I have to introduce what a powerhouse I have in front of me, even though she's very quiet about it. So Luisa has been practicing, I'm going to read a little bit, practicing and teaching insight meditation for the last 35 years. And I would say you've been a meditator for longer than that, probably, Luisa, but you can say it when I pass the baton. And she received training for this from Spirit Rock Meditation Center. So for some of you that are watching, also part of the Bar Center for Buddhist Studies. And she currently is part of the Insight Meditation community of Washington since its beginning. Luisa was one of the first people, one of the pioneers of it, and working with Jack Kornfield and people like Tara Brach, and Tara Brach goes all the way. I remember having dinner with her years ago at your home and just feeling like such a fangirl because she signed my book. But this was so many years ago. Luisa is one of the teachers and lead teachers in Jack Kornfield's and Tara Brach's mindful meditation teacher certification program, and you mentor people through there. You can say a little bit more. So part of what happens is meditation classes, day-long retreats, residential retreats in the DC area. So please look those up, everyone. The Mindful Meditation Teachers Certification Program. Luisa is Cuban. Her family were Cuban and came to the United States. And her roots are with Southern Baptist Church. And this is important because it shows how our path can take us and where we are from. And she has explored the fourth way and Buddhist teachings. So that's an interesting combination, isn't it? Your Buddhist roots and your Buddhist personality today. So Luisa has also been a part of just really exploring the interface between spiritual traditions. In the 3D world, in her day-to-day world, Luisa has spent, I don't know, Lou, like 40 years. She was a Peace Corps volunteer and then came to the DC area and has been a leader in international development consulting firms, but also a part of nonprofits that work with immigrant communities. The last one being the Latin American Youth Center. Is that correct? Yeah. Yeah. The director of that. She's retired today, but still super active. Luisa, it's an honor. It's an honor to walk this path with you and to have you here because you're really one of the people I go to for spiritual guidance and for your wisdom.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Claudia. I mean, this is such a treat. I mean, we've talked about, about doing this, and then here we are. Thank you. Wow, you make me sound so big and, significant. And I feel like I've sort of in my part of the world, maybe have made a difference. But anyway,
You have made a difference. I feel like if I don't do this, if I don't put a spotlight on you, you would never do it. But yeah, you're a pretty heavy hitter in terms of the spiritual community, but also in terms of the work that you've done as a global citizen for immigrants. And when we were working together, certainly for people overseas, like you really, really have been committed to having your work be part of the way that you've reached for your own life bliss, as Joseph Campbell would say. Luisa and I meet probably once every 6 weeks. We go to our favorite diner and we make sure we have about 2 hours to talk about everything, and we always connect spiritually. And one of the things that in our last breakfast came up was this idea of, and maybe you can talk about more in Buddhist language, this idea of how we allow what is happening around us and inside of us. When times feel uncertain, turbulent, emotional, where we don't have something to grab onto that sometimes could make us feel safe. So, and I said immediately, we have to do this podcast right now in the middle of 2025. So I'm going to pass the baton to you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Claudia. And before we start that, I also must say that I have been so inspired by your work. And I just feel like you're one of those people that have this really courageous heart, because you're willing to take risks. You're willing to really put yourself out there, and not only for yourself or for others. And so it's been so gratifying, particularly these last few years, to see sort of all of your efforts and work, and that through the years come to fruition, where you're really where you're really helping and serving others. So anyway, I just want to say that because we have watched each other through the years, ups and downs, and through so many things. And it's just really gratifying to be here now and see So thank you. Thank you for so
Thank
much for
you.
having me
Thank you
today.
so, so much. Thank you so, so much.
Yeah, I think our conversation at that last breakfast was probably one that isn't uncommon these days. I think so many people, particularly empaths and people just in general, are trying to, figure out how do we live in this world that seems, so chaotic, so fraught with so many things, and we could list them. We won't do that, but there's just so many things that we're faced with these days, and I think many of us are challenged by how do we respond to the world's suffering and to the world's situation, while at the same time not losing ourselves and staying grounded and taking care of ourselves. And so I think that was where our conversation was kind of going, this balance between being in the world and accepting things as they are, and then acting in the world in a way to change and to maybe influence those things that we know are causing harm. So it's just interesting, when we look at different spiritual traditions, and what I know best is Buddhism, because that's where I've spent most of my time and my spiritual practice these last, several decades. But that the Buddha, 2,600 years ago, specifically talked about this, that life in this world is an uneven path. He even sort of, the translation is that he said, this world is an uneven path. And so what we're constantly challenged to do is to walk evenly in this world that really is an uneven path. And that's, the tools that we have, that we use, not only meditation, but so many other tools that we use and that have been, brought down through the generations and that are also being recreated today, I think, is what's helping us, to walk this path evenly, despite the fact that things are uneven and that life is very uneven and uncertain. So that's the challenge that we have for ourselves in the world. That, and how do we deal with what's going on today? Not by struggling or fighting or opposing it, but really by interacting with it, relating to it honestly and openly, and trusting, in some way. So yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
such a important topic.
it
Right.
is. It is. And it's actually, this is going to sound a bit dramatic, but I feel like it's radical. I do feel like it's a radical choice. And I'd like us to get more into the details with some examples so that folks who are watching the podcast can really utilize maybe some tools or some steps. But
Mhm.
the way that I see it as radical is because it's so counterintuitive, right? It really feels like we have these urges, these emotions, these impulses, and we want to just move into action, do something. And it doesn't mean, what I don't hear you saying is, it doesn't mean that we don't move into action. It means that there's what I call the sacred pause of some sort. Is this what you're saying? Which is
Yes.
radical, Luisa, I've been doing this series, and now you're going to be a part of this series of I feel how we're entering into the era of emotions, of how to not just have this operating system of emotions that really is what gets us most tied up, but how do we take these pauses, use these tools, and be more discerning about how we're living our external world. And I think
Mm,
this
mm,
ties right into what you're saying.
yes. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Actually, if you'll indulge me, I'll read this little poem that I ran across, which I think, sometimes poetry gets to the heart of things in a way that, many words can't. But Claudia, as you were just talking, it's like it's radical, and in a way it's simple. So I think this poem sort of speaks to that. So it was written by Wendell Berry. And
Mm.
interestingly enough, it was written in 1968. And he's an essayist and a novelist and a farmer. And he's 90 years old, I think, today, these days. But he's been around a long time, a poet and an environmentalist. But in 1968, at the height of the Vietnam War,
Yes.
right, when life in certain ways was pretty chaotic, he wrote
Well,
this
and where
poem.
people believed, let's just talk like 2 seconds on
Yeah,
1968. 1968, people believed that the world was burning. Really, there were deaths on college campuses, the protests, all the assassinations
yeah,
of
it was a
really
volatile
prominent
time.
people. It really felt like what is happening to our morality, to right. It was a moment where it felt like the world was burning and there were so many changes going on. So let's drop us into that zeitgeist, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So with that context, Wendell Berry wrote this. He says, "In the dark of the moon, in flying snow, in the dead of winter, war spreading, families dying, the world in danger, I walk the rocky hillside sowing clover." What I love about this poem, what I love because it's a paradox. It's like there's this paradox while the world is on fire, the world is being unmade, it's in danger, the poem says. There's this simple sower that just walks this rocky hillside, sowing clover. And it's sort of like, I can anyway kind of intuit this determination of this simple sower, right? That is set against all the world's tribulation. This sower is planting, is creating, is healing, is walking, is noticing. And it doesn't mean that the sower is ignorant or blind to the trials and tribulations of the world.
Mhm.
There's a sense that this sower is right in the world. But to me, it just demonstrates this ability, this capacity that we have, as human beings, to be in the world and to see its suffering and to act when needed, while at the same time walking calmly and sowing these seeds. So to me, that really is sort of it's bringing heaven to our incarnation on earth. It's like walking, it's like an attitude of heavenness on the earthly plane, right? So anyway, I just that poem really struck me. I read it after our breakfast conversation. I thought, oh, this really gets to the heart of it, you know.
Yeah, you're just blowing my mind right now. So let me and I sometimes I will write because I just want to track. Okay, so just so you know. So hold
Yeah,
on, Luisa.
yeah.
Of course, you're touching on the idea of heaven on earth. Okay, so I want us to riff. I want us to. It's like two musicians who just start to because part of it. I'm not even sure if this exists, Luisa, but I have this image of my favorite Buddha. The image
Mm,
of my favorite Buddha is one hand towards the sky and the other touching the earth. Does that
mhm,
actually exist? I might have seen it somewhere, but if not, like that's how I see him in lotus position, one hand towards the sky, one hand touching the earth, which is what I mean by heaven on earth. Is that we're taking notice of the treasure of the heavenly moments around us
yes,
mindfully, but we're on earth. We're touching, we're grounding. We are here. And sometimes being here means the chaos. So that's one thing that you said. And
yeah.
I think it's really special for me to share that image with you because I hold that image a lot in terms of
Mm,
what heaven on earth means to me is that we're doing this, right? Which
yes.
is the yin yang, which is what you're describing, right? Like chop wood, carry water, like move slowly amidst these fast times.
Mm,
Move
mm,
gently, move slowly. And it's counterintuitive. And I want to propose that it's the antidote. But before I say that, Luisa, there's something about, and can you talk about this more? I keep saying on this podcast that we're not emotionally or spiritually bypassing anything,
mm. Yeah.
that
You mean
there
when
is
we?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
What you mean? We're not bypassing when we take the time to
Or
for
that
the
we
inner.
are witnessing what is happening,
Mm,
that we have trauma on planet Earth and inside of us,
mm,
that there is sex trafficking and exploitation of the planet and of children and of animals, that there is a type of dominance that is exploitative. We are not spiritually or emotionally bypassing what's happening. It's not Pollyanna. And I think the
yeah,
poem really, really, really speaks to that. Can you say a
yeah,
little bit more about what this touches in you?
yeah, yeah. This is a bit the conundrum, of what we're talking about, and really, walking this path. Um, And actually, I'm I'm also reading this book right now, Richard Rohr. I think you know
Oh, I
him, the
love
Richard,
him.
the
Yes,
Franciscan
I
friar,
love him.
and it's actually about the Old Testament prophets,
Hmm.
and how the prophets initially came into, basically they came in when the prophets sort of came up, and their purpose was to point out injustices, even in the spiritual sort of realm, even in the religious realm, and to point out injustices and when things were not going right, and when people were going further and further away from the truth of the teachings, right? And they always sort of started with, almost initiated by anger and just this sense of just being justified, righteousness. But their paths, and Richard Rohr, I've just started the book, talks about each one of these, that their trajectory was to end up in love. That they eventually, so almost all of them, all these major prophets in the Bible, had this journey where they started with this, like, this has got to change, and there's injustices and oppression and this and that, and then ultimately they came to sort of do their work and point and continue to do the work, the hard work that they were meant to do, but with a sense of love and of connection. And so it's, again, I think Richard Rohr's writing that book. It just came out specifically because of the times that we're in. Again, what we're talking about is this sense of, it's not bypassing when you take time to heal yourself and to connect with what matters, with what's significant and what matters to you. And then we're better able to act from that. It doesn't mean that you stay there, that you stay in the cave, gazing at your navel. It means that you bring that calm, that lightness, that quietness, that perhaps truth, even, that you're better able to see because you've sloughed off all of sort of the distractions and come into silence. And then that's what we walk around, and that's what we use as a foundation to really act. Perhaps I always, say, in a more appropriate, wise way, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you're reminding me of Malcolm X's journey, where it did sort of take off with rage and injustice and a deep, profound urge that empaths have. I mean,
Yes.
in my book, The Empath Leader, yeah, I'm going to plug it, coming out
Yeah,
in July. Yes, the second edition. Really
totally.
excited about that. But I talk a
Yeah,
lot about, like, that the one way to see an empath really rage or come out with lightning bolts is in the face of injustice. Like, that's really, they might take all sorts of stuff when it comes to themselves, their tolerance levels, or, as I say, they'll miss their exits for a long time. But when they see an injustice, when they see bullying, the empath is the one who is just going to speak out or call out the elephant in the room.
yeah,
And I believe, Malcolm X was an incredible empath, but his journey was that he ended up in pilgrimage and saw that there were people from all over the world following the same path, and he ended up speaking of love and of feeling connected, this great connection. Luisa, can you
yeah,
say a
yeah.
little bit more about rage? about
Yeah.
about anger, especially from a
Mm.
Buddhist point of view, but also just from your point of view, because it is a catalyst. It can serve, rage can serve, even Gandhi, rage can serve as a fuel, especially when it comes to injustice. Can you say something about that?
Yeah. Yeah, no, and that's so important because I think we can also fall into the trap of saying, oh, being a Buddhist and being spiritual and, is all about not expressing our anger or not having anger. And that's not the case at all. I actually like Ruth King, who's a wonderful meditation teacher, says, anger is initiatory, it's just not transformative. And so, I love that because anger can
Mm.
initiate us into action. Or even if not action, anger can kind of bring to full relief something that we might have ignored or neglected. But if we stay there, if we stay in the anger, and if we're using the anger then as a basis of our action, that's when, according to the Buddhist, to the Buddha, you're just creating more suffering. Violence never leads to less violence. Hatred never ceases by hatred alone. Only through love, is hatred. That's a very, popular and famous line from the Buddha. So yeah, I think there is a place for it, and we need to be careful also. And I know for myself, because I'm angry avoidance, I don't like to be angry, and it's been hard to express my anger and learn how to express it in a wise way. That it is not about saying, oh, that's bad, let's put that over here, let's repress it, let's not, talk about it. It's a human emotion, just like so many. And I think the more we bring those things to light, we're able to see them and then put them in their place. They have a place. They have a place.
Say more about that, like having a place, and I want to have it as a backdrop to your answer. This idea that what I've been talking about is that we do come with this emotional operating system, and that
Mhm.
our emotions are teachers, are messengers. They're saying something, including depression, anxiety, rage. I just said that for the empath, by the time an empath is raging, they've passed many exits.
Mm.
So
Mm.
they need to listen. They don't have to judge themselves, because empaths like you feel really bad if they're angry, if they're raging. And yet there's a type of fire that's trying to get our attention. Like, what is the message in our rage? What is it asking us to do? So this idea that it's an initiator, I love it. But maybe like
Yeah.
in any emotion, is this what you're saying, Lisa? That getting stuck in any emotion is a very tricky thing. There's an attachment there.
Yeah. 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 And again, this is really where the tools of mindfulness I think are just so helpful because it's the sense of like nothing that arises, nothing that arises in our meditation, nothing that arises sort of in our life is a failure or is wrong in some way. But the important part of it is when we allow it and pay attention to it. It's when we're not sort of paying attention, and this is where mindfulness comes in. It's when we're not paying attention to it that it can then wreak havoc. We're not aware of it. It has a life of its own. It's like
Mm.
being pulled into something with no spaciousness and with basically just constriction, right? But if something everything that arises
So it can go rogue. Is-
it can go rogue
It
when
goes
we're not
rogue.
mindful, right? When
Sure.
we're not mindful. And of course, we can't be mindful 100% of the time either. So I don't want to, convey the idea that this is something, you're always going to be able to catch it before it goes rogue. We're humans. We're not perfect, So part of it is catching it as soon as we can and practicing so that we catch it earlier and earlier, right, in its trajectory. Because when we allow for it and give space to anything, sadness, anger, fear, you know, all the emotions that we have, um, even distraction itself, when we give attention to it, make a space big enough for it, then it's just something happening in the field of many things happening. It's when we collapse around a particular emotion that I think we can get caught, and it and cause harm to ourselves and maybe others too.
Collapse into it, right? Actually
Yeah,
collapse right
collapse.
into it. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right. I mean,
Yeah.
I know that's happened to me, before, where I've just like I become that thing, that whatever it is,
Yes.
anger or frustration or sense of disconnection or victimhood, or I collapse around that, and then that's what I become, right? There's no room for anything else. But with practice, I can soften, open that up a bit. Oh, I don't have to push it away. It's still here. I can still see it and feel it, but it's not consuming me.
Yeah.
And that really is, I think, the fruit of practice, and the promise is that we can, little by little, doesn't happen overnight, and it's a lifelong process, perhaps many lifetimes of a process, but getting closer and closer to this ability to, yeah, okay, that's there. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Lisa, you're reminding me, and I talk about him a lot, and I talk about the idea of Carl Jung's shadow, because that is sort of our emotions going, our shame, our
mm,
embarrassment, what we closet, emotions that we closet.
yeah.
And I always say, these emotions will ambush us. They lurk, they stalk us, they're going to find us. And as a psychotherapist, I always say, which is really just a loving approach to it, because people are so terrified to go into the shadow, to look at the shadow, to give the shadow space. And we don't blame anyone, because some of our shadows are, right? Our trauma, our sexual abuse, our addictions. But if we, like everything else, when we give it loving attention, when we give a child loving attention, there is a way that things calm down. And maybe that's part of
Mm,
one of the subtexts to what we're talking about. If we can look at the world even with loving attention, with mindfulness, how do we shift our gaze into looking with loving attention? Because once we befriend, what I call befriend the shadow, then they're not amputations that are out there creating havoc, right? Right
mm,
around the corner, waiting to collapse on our life, not just collapse inside of us.
mm,
Lisa, can you say some more about giving it space?
mm,
Can you,
mhm.
because there might be some people watching us going like, what does that even mean, to give my
How do I do
rage,
that?
my jealousy, my envy, my disgust, like some hard emotions? How do we give it space?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. And I think the actual skillful means, the tools to doing that are varied and can be different for different people in terms of the actual tools you use. For some people, going on meditation retreats, going on intensive sort of retreats where they can really unplug and just really, it's a sacred pause that's maybe several days long,
Mhm.
and really sit with that is a way to do it. For some people, other people, that's just not possible. You have young kids, or you have a work your job that you can't leave, etc. So I think it looks differently, but I think at the end of the day, it really has to start with an intention or a commitment
Mm.
that this is important to you. To ask yourself what's
Mhm.
most important, what really matters, and to continually ask yourself that question. That, then leads you to exploring what will work for you, what will work for you. And I just think, that's why we call this whole path of practice, because it's like learning to do anything new, the piano or sports. It's just practice. You keep coming back and you keep coming back. And there's so many things that help. I think community, Sangha, the Buddha talked about the importance of community and noble friendship, so who you surround yourself with, and having a community of people like-minded or that are supporting you in your practice, that you can relate to and that you can speak these things to. That is like almost these days, I think even more important than a teacher is the importance of community,
I love
spiritual
this.
community, beloved community, like Martin Luther King Jr. talked about. Same thing, beloved community. So, and then there's like, these podcasts and your books and other books and inspirational readings and poetry. I mean, I use poetry a lot nowadays,
Yes, yes.
and just things that inspire you. Nature, being out in nature.
Mhm.
If those are the things that sort of nurture us and nourish us and maybe inspire us to then make some efforts, because this path is not, it is a rocky hillside. It's rocky. It's not sort of a, namby-pamby kind of path that
It
we're on.
isn't. It isn't. I keep repeating in
So,
the book, this isn't for the meek. I always say,
yes.
have you tried to self-love? Have you ever self-love? It is hard to
Yeah.
self-love. Like, have you really tried to self-love? Have you tried to have compassion for the self? I mean, it is so cringy. It is so hard. Have you tried looking in the mirror? When I say, like, do some mirror work, you will see.
Yeah.
Sit with these hard emotions. This is not for the meek. In fact, I think it is why we run from it. We run
Yeah.
from this practice. And I guess
I,
to underscore the need for community, and community can be 12-step groups, it can be support groups, it could be other folks who are on whatever path of the inner journey, whether it's to heal an addiction or to reach for God, if that's your path.
absolutely.
Luisa, what
Absolutely.
would you say? You've mentored so many people, you've taught so many classes. And Tara talks about this in her book Radical Acceptance, and she keeps beating the drum to it. Is, what would you say to folks who say, are you kidding me, sitting, because going to a meditation retreat still feels like an action, but
Mm-hmm.
the actual sitting mindfully
Mm-hmm.
with what is arising, what do you say to folks who are like, oh my gosh, this is so hard? What would you say?
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, it is, oh, well, not by the way, even it is hard. It is hard. And so I think sometimes when people try to approach this and just find it so difficult, they think that they're sort of unusual, that's atypical. But, I want to normalize this, the challenge of sitting still with yourself. And also the process of self-love, right? It's not an easy thing to do. Again, I sort of fall back on you. It's very difficult to do it alone. And so I know that nowadays, anyway, there's a lot of resources out there, online, in person as well, but a lot of resources online. So I encourage people to just use whatever resonates with them to help them. They can do guided meditations. There's a lot out there. There's wonderful Dharma talks. There's opportunities like this to plug into people having these conversations and being a part of it. So I just think it really takes a village almost. It takes a lot to sort of, if someone were just going to say to me, I just want to sit in my room and learn how to meditate by myself. That's tough. Some people can do that, but it's really hard. And to remember that there's different forms of meditation. So if sitting still in a dark room or in a low lighted room is not your cup of tea, then go for a walk in nature, but do it slowly and mindfully. Notice the sensations of your feet on the ground and the breeze, and just really, but do it slowly, not your usual getting from A to Z, or A to B. Slow down. Nature, for some people, it's sitting looking out a window with a cup of tea and hear or listening to the birds, or being by a waterfall, reading, I think, an inspirational book, and then pausing throughout that, as you read it and really reflect on it. Yeah, I think there are many classes, also. At the end of the day, one of the things that and again, I've practiced for a long time. It's still difficult to bring it to my daily life, right? I can sit in meditation, for 30, 45 minutes and then, go out into the world and something will trigger me. But it's to also continually be asking yourself throughout the day, pausing that pause throughout the day, just, come into your body, drop. We don't live in our bodies. So just even dropping into the bodies and noticing what we notice, asking ourselves, what's happening right now? What's happening right now? And how can I be with it? Those two questions, what's happening right now and how can I be with it? Even for just 30 seconds, if we can do that a few times a day, I think it really, I think, not to underestimate its power.
Yes.
To just do those few minutes.
Yes. I just heard someone, I don't remember, he's someone well known, but I don't know him, say to ask, this is just what I'm feeling right now. The right now really helps. It's just what I'm feeling right now. Like it helps, like this isn't forever. And the reason why I created dynamic meditation, Luisa, was because even though I was sitting in the mornings, I was still getting triggered quite a bit throughout the days. When I met you in the 90s is when I started really this path, this super healing path is the time that we work together. But because I work with people with complex post-trauma and ADHD and high anxiety, general anxiety, I don't want to call it disorder, but just that's the way they're living life. So having tools to drop into while it's happening, while you're in the boardroom, while you're at the happy hour, while you're on the train, while your boyfriend is away, while you're in the dating pool. Like, how do we do it? How do we make it portable and practical is exactly what dynamic meditation is about. But let me just bring it all together for a second here. There's something about what you described. I think the Buddhists call it walking meditations, this moving slowly, this noticing, reading, reflecting is for me these how you thread heaven on earth. And it takes us back. It's like, how do we keep threading moments? Let's say we have one moment of walking and experiencing nature, and then we have this chaotic life. And then we sit in the morning or we hear a song that drops us into peacefulness. How do we start to thread more and more moments, like when we meet for breakfast, right? Heaven on earth moments, when we're walking, when we're with our fur animals. How do we keep threading them in the midst of what we're feeling in the planet, which takes us back to your poem?
Yeah.
She's saying sewing while this is happening. But go ahead.
Yeah, that is the challenge. But even having the question is like is like a great step. And I think anyone who is listening to this and has joined you in the past and is here listening has already sort of taken in a way that step. Though I agree with you and thank you for bringing that up, because it's hard enough as it is, and then there are some of us who have additional obstacles, in the sense of our upbringing or illnesses or our life situations that make it even harder, to find moments of calm. So, but the fact that, people have asked that question and that they have that intention and there's something in them that's sort of urging them, I think is huge. And to honor that is to really honor that, to say, wow, this is to really recognize that, to love the fact that there's been this impulse in you, to ask the question. And then this is a journey. It is a long journey. As you know, there's no overnight, doing this. There's no real, cookie cutter. It's an exploration. It's constantly asking yourself what is needed right now. What do I need? What is needed? What is possible, for me in this moment. And the self love is huge, because I think we're just we in this culture in particular, we're so down on ourselves. The inner critic, of course, there's been a lot written and said about that, and the constant judging. And the Buddha gave practices to sort of mitigate some of that. The metta practice, the loving kindness practice, which is a formal way to slowly open your heart to yourself, to others as well. But sometimes ourselves is the hardest one to give love to, right? As you said
Absolutely.
earlier.
Yes.
So we do weave together, moments, Claudia. I think some days are easier than others. But I think, the foundation of being able to weave moments during the day, even though, more may be needed, is sort of a regular, as much as possible, having a regular time where you go into silence or quietness. And it doesn't have to be this ideal, of even 30, 40 minutes, an hour. It can be 5 minutes, just a little bit of time where you really come in into yourself and ask that question, what really matters to me, what really matters. So it's and then it grows, over time. It takes a bit, and doing all the other things that people need to do to take care of themselves, therapy and healing
Yes.
modalities and 12 step and
Yes.
all of that. This doesn't preclude any of that. It's all part of the journey.
Yes, yes, yes. I always say that meditation, the way I teach it, because people are like, but I'm Muslim or I'm ADHD, and I'm always like, listen, meditation is like tofu. just just add it to whatever it is that you're doing to self-heal, to self-reflect. It'll take on that flavor. Like really, it can be added to any tradition, any modality. It truly is part of our day-to-day just sort of sparkle in terms of it's so ephemeral, but it is foundational. And I guess what I want to say a little bit to the audience, and I'm not sure where you land on this, is what I have found being a survivor of complex post trauma myself, being someone who was extremely triggered. You knew me at that time. Toxic relationships, all of that, depressions and anxiety, 12-step programs. What I have found is that the more time that I take on the inner journey through meditation, through reflection, reading, through friendships like yours, communities, my baseline, and I really want to offer this to you who are listening, my baseline has just risen. Meaning, so there's two things that's important for people to know. When you keep the beat, as I say, that's a cloudism. When you keep the beat on the practice over and over and over and over again, right? Over time, not only does it get easier to practice, it doesn't mean the emotions don't hit you. It just means that it's easier to have this place where you know to go. And Luisa, I hope, you're going to laugh, but I always say, sit your ass down first, basically. Like sit down, feel. It does get easier, and your baseline gets higher. Meaning you might not go all the way back to the depressions you had when you started on the journey. Your baseline, your ability to hold a different emotional, spiritual baseline, for me has gotten stronger, and it's just higher. And the other thing I want to say to people who are listening is track your recovery. Right, Luisa, I don't know if you found that maybe you'll get triggered, but the way you recover is quicker than you did when you started the journey. It's just faster. It doesn't mean you don't get the punch in the stomach.
Yep.
you just track, don't go by whether, wait a minute, why am I still jealous? Wait a minute, why does this still hurt? It's more like, no, wait, I recovered a lot quicker once I dropped in, once I did my practice.
Mm.
Do you agree with this? How is
I
this?
absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. It's like I see that in myself. I still get triggered by all kinds of things. I just don't stay in there as long as I used to.
Yes.
It just it's there and it kind of it goes through and I might get all kind and then it's gone. It's not, yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that is the fruit of practice. As
Yes.
long as we're not like, super enlightened beings, we're going to be triggered. We're going to, this is our life. There's nothing wrong with that, inherently wrong, right? Yeah,
Yes.
I agree with you. I do. I do.
Lisa, let me ask one thing about this idea of doing it alone. And I'd like you to maybe talk a little bit about this myth of the yogi who's on top of the mountain and reaching enlightenment, like this whole idea of like the way to really be able to practice is by going away and being away from humans. And
Yeah.
I mean, what you were saying is like, no, it's in our day-to-day life. Can you say something about that?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, the image that comes to me, and this is not mine, it's Pema Chodron, who's a wonderful Tibetan teacher, who's written many books. She talks about that enlightenment or this path to awakening is not like you're transcending the world and you're going up into some kind of to the top of the mountain. She said, think of it as the mountain is inverted and you're actually going down into the muck of things. She says the muck of things. So you're really sitting. So the mountain is inverted and you're really going down and sitting in live stuff. And what we're finding is that when we sit with the muck of life, this is the amazing thing, Claudia. It's just so
Yes.
amazing. We
Yes.
find love. We find beauty there. It's so interesting. It's like the lotus, the lotus flower. And I have a tattoo of a lotus on my back because it's the reminder of the lotus, its roots are in the mud, and it grows, this beautiful flower grows out of the mud. So yeah, that's the conundrum, right? And this is why it's not easy and why we need help and we need supports and we need community, we need therapists and we need people like you kind of guiding us because it's hard to go down there and sit in the muck of it and wait long enough for beauty to arrive, but it's there.
It
Yeah.
is, Lisa. And what you're making me think of is, and I'm thank you for describing what the lotus means because we do see these symbols all the time. And I would add to the word conundrum, it's the great paradox, and actually holding the paradox in balance, which is that it is, I call it the wound is the gift. If we and with practice, actually, with practice, y'all, with keeping the beat to these practices, what happens is we do this, the highest spiritual art of alchemy, that our wounds, trauma survivors, if you're listening, can become this place of creativity, of beauty, of being able to walk with others who've also experienced. Like if we go into the muck with all sorts of modalities,
Yep.
because it is hard when we do
Yes.
these, when we spelunk through the muck,
Yeah.
right? When we're going through it, when we're crawling, as I say, we need people like you, Luisa, like groups that are doing it with us, or are on the other side, that say, come on, because there is great beauty. And when you said the thing about the inverted, I have found that underneath all the layers, like I'm ashamed, I'm envious, I'm gross, I'm afraid, I'm guilty, when we keep going down over and over and over, we inevitably hit the and I love me.
Mm.
it has many layers above it, which is why it's hard to do the self-love work. But as you're saying, we will find love, and it threads together. The prophets found love. You found love. We will find love at the bottom of it all.
Mm.
Um,
Mm. Yeah.
so this inverted
Yeah.
mountain. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We, another thing that I take a lot of comfort in is that everywhere I've looked, right? And it's not that I've had an exhaustive exploration of different spiritual traditions, but everywhere everything that I've come in contact with, and everywhere that I've looked and listened to and read and sat with many, many different teachers and masters, etc., they all point to that. They all point to love. It can't. It's so in my mind, it's like they can't be wrong. Even sometimes when I don't feel it, little old me doesn't quite feel it. It's like underneath everything. You're right, Claudia. Just as you said, it was really beautiful. Underneath everything that's what we'll find. At the end of the day, that's what we find. That's what we are. Actually,
Yes.
that's what we are. And we don't believe it.
Yes.
We don't trust it sometimes, but really that's the continual thing I remind myself of, that's what we are. We are as complete as we need to be, and we are loved. And you're right, the circumstances that we face, though they may be difficult, are perhaps what we need, and we can find love even within that.
Mhm.
So
Yes,
yeah.
that is. Luisa, we just add a few moments? So one of the things that I ask my guests on the podcast, I have what I call the 3 volumes. And
Mm-hmm.
which is the volume was the story you were born into is volume 1. The awakening story, which is volume 2, like where did you start to say, wait, even if it's through painful things. And then the volume 3 is what I call the chosen life, which is, our heaven on earth life, like the
Mm-hmm.
life that we have designed and curated and picked. And then I want to leave you with the question, what is heaven on earth for you? But talk to me just first about your volume 1, because you are an immigrant from Cuba during those times when Cuba was in full on revolution and Baptist church. Can you just give us a little bit of your volume 1?
Yeah. Yes, actually, I think that, yeah, I would say that probably my immigrant story is one of the things that's most impacted my life, because it impacted, again, my whole family and my childhood. Um, but one thing the story, thank God, and I know that I am blessed that part of the story that I was born into is that I had a mother whom whom you knew, Claudia, who was my first spiritual teacher, really, and continues to be my spiritual teacher, even though she's long passed away. And so I grew up at Southern Baptist in North Carolina, so pretty conservative. There wasn't a whole lot of, tolerance in a one way. And yet my mother really walked the pure Christian life. I don't know, how I karmically got lucky enough to have her as a mother. So anyway, that really, even though I went away from my root religion, which was her religion, I still feel like there's this connection, this door that she opened for me, in terms of it being okay, to explore and to be spiritual and to look beyond kind of what we can see and feel and touch with our human senses. So I think, that has
I
really
do
led.
know this about her. Like I do know this about her, because if people hear that she was Southern Baptist, they might get an image, but your mother and her whole surroundings embodied that. She was really quite open and quite accepting of all people.
That's right. And the main thing is that she walked her own spiritual path. And I think without, she just, it was her thing. She walked her own spiritual path, and so just modeled it. I think for both myself and my siblings. But I did then, search and explore. And I have to say psychedelics were part of my story as well. And I'm appreciative of those, of that experience.
In what way? I talk about psychedelics as a modality a lot, especially today, with
Yeah,
guides, with structure. I'm not saying go,
exactly. With a lot
like,
of safety.
yeah, with
Right.
a lot of safety. But how
Lot
did
of safety.
that open up your experience?
I think it just opened me to the understanding that there were other realms, that what I could, what I normally, my ordinary walk around life, kind of my perspectives could change, that was fluid, that things were fluid, that there was no sort of rigidity to my perspectives and realities. So yeah, again, I would also caution people in using those plant medicine nowadays. For me, it was an eye opening experiences. So yeah, I think all of it, and then
That's
just
like your
slowly.
volume two a little bit, your awakening, like starting to see, or literally an awakening, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, exactly. And then I think that definitely led me to Buddhism. I did other things in the midst there, but I think once I really was exposed to these teachings, it felt like I had come home. It felt like what had been missing from my childhood Baptist roots,
Mm,
the tools. There was a lot of sort of dogma, but not the tools to, at least in my experience. I know that
yeah.
there is in that spiritual tradition, but I wasn't getting that as a child or teenager or young adult. So Buddhism gave me these tools. Oh my goodness, I can use the breath, and there's loving kindness, and I can do, there were all these sort of, they were supportive. So I think that's a little bit of the
What a good
trajectory.
point you're making. I mean, I talk about tools all the time, psycho spiritually, but when you're talking about it in relation to your story of origin, it's interesting. It's almost like it gives you all these concepts. I always say they're so lofty, like forgive your enemy, or like, or only show love. It just felt so lofty. How do we
How do you
forgive?
do that? How do you do that?
How? And there's something so grounding about tools. It's like a little instruction manual that we get
Yeah.
as humans.
Yes, yes. And I will have to say a caveat that the longer I have practiced, and mostly Buddhism, the more I am connected to my Christian roots. So I really feel, again, this blending. One doesn't feel exclusive of the other. I wanted to sort of make that clear, because I think it's all there, really,
Yes,
in
it
some
is.
way when we dig deep enough.
It is.
Yeah,
It is.
yeah,
And if we
yeah.
can stay open to the fact that it's multiple paths to the
Multiple paths.
one place of love, that if we can
Yes.
actually make the connections,
Many doorways. Exactly. Exactly.
and
And
then
then heaven on earth. Yeah, heaven
yeah,
on
and
earth.
then like what, talk about your chosen life a little bit, Lou, like
Yeah.
the when did you start to feel like it, well, you just described one, like I kept parts of my volume 1, I
Hmm.
brought in some volume 2, like when we start to just curate our life.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Well, I think that for me probably started when I was in the Peace Corps. And maybe that's because, being in another country and sort of being away from what was familiar, and so it was there that sort of, I guess, if there was like a direction shift, it started to happen there. And yeah, and it was more toward looking for sort of a deeper experience. Looking, the psychedelics were okay in the sense of like opening the door, but they didn't really get me there. So it was
Mhm.
really, again, that the doors opening, in a way, being away, being in another country, being in unfamiliar situation, the psychedelics, and this root trust that I have of things unearthly, um,
Yes, yes.
that then made it okay for me to sort of, begin to explore. And like I said, I ended up in with Buddhism, really,
How did
I'm
that
so
happen,
thankful.
Lou? How did that happen? How did you
You know,
stumble upon this?
I am forever grateful. I don't know, what I did in another lifetime to come into contact with Tara Brach early in my, experience, because she was the one that sort of opened that door even further for me and said, "Hey, come on in," you know. So I began to go to her classes, and then stepped into more of a helping role and volunteer and leadership roles. And yeah, I would say just right
She's one of your
now,
love stories, I would say. Your friendship
absolutely,
runs it goes way back, and it runs so deep. Like when I feel the two of you, it's almost nonverbal the way that the two of you connect. When I feel you, I've been around you two, not as often, but she is one of your deep love stories.
it's
Yes, yes,
absolutely true.
yes,
Absolutely true.
yes.
In the mental practice, you one of the categories is that you give loving wishes, and you wish well-being and happiness to different beings. And one of the categories is called your benefactor, but it's like your teachers, your mentors, people who have led you. And Tara's always in there.
Yeah,
She's always in there,
yeah,
definitely. Yeah, yeah, I'm very grateful, very, very grateful
yes,
for
yes, yes.
that
Yes, the
relationship.
world is grateful for her and for
Yeah.
you because you do a lot of her work here in
Mm,
this area. You do. There's a few of you that really carry her torch with so
yeah.
much
Well,
integrity.
yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Claudia.
Mhm.
Yeah. The only thing I was going to say to sort of end the thing of what my story is now, what is interesting me right now, and this could be a whole nother podcast, so I won't
Oh, you're
just
coming
mention,
back on.
is, and we've been talking about it to some degree, but it really is kind of like the interaction between the relative world and the absolute world. And so, and I, again, I don't want to go into all of what I'm meaning by that at this
Give
point,
us a
but it really,
teaser. Give us a teaser though.
well, it sort of is in Buddhism, there's so many, it's like Christianity, there's many, many different sects and many different ways to practice, and so many different traditions. And there's one sort of tradition that is non-dual. It's the non-dual experiences, sort of the emptiness experiences, where we live in this relative world, and it's what we can see, hear, touch, feel. We live here, so this is our reality. And yet there's this other reality where all of this that we think is permanent and solid is not. It's illusionary.
Yes.
And so I am by no means an expert, and I am just dabbling in this.
Yes.
But it interests me as I age and get closer to, frankly, death. I'm
Yes.
more and more interested in that,
Mhm.
in that experience, and sort of human experience, but that is not tied to our bodies,
Mhm.
and to solidity or permanence.
Yes. Yes.
So
Yes. Yes.
yeah.
And I would venture to say, because I dabble in this all the time, daily, is it's always with us.
Mm,
And
yeah.
the right, it's always with us. And so it actually is what allows us, if we tap into that world that is not the relative world, as you would call it, we can actually, I have this experience of loving this world more because we're so aware of the experience of having incarnated to be here, to smell our animals. I always say that, to smell cooking, to touch, to hug you when I see
Mm,
you, Luisa.
mm,
The experience, to be aware that actually this is impermanent, and that
yeah.
there's this way that that we as spirits live here. And so I tend to say that it allows for the heaven on earth experience so much more, because how are we not to love our rivers and the trees blowing in the wind, and even the journey of having to create our wounds into gifts. So I appreciate you talking about this a ton.
Yeah, I think one way to look at it is exactly that, is heaven on earth. It's the two are, it's like it's not putting one above the other. It's the two sort of interwoven.
Yes, right. Yes.
Yeah,
Oh my
exactly.
gosh, I
Yes.
just love this so much.
Yeah.
It's like a
Yeah.
mudra maybe for heaven on earth for me. Like it's like I'm touching the ground and I'm
Yeah.
reaching. I'm reaching.
Yeah. Yes.
What is your
Yes.
heaven on earth, Luisa? And this isn't a test. It's sort of maybe just a thought or a scene or
Well, one of the things that it's kind of what, when I was thinking about this, what first came to mind is maybe what it's not, because I think there can be maybe a misconception. And so I thought, well, it's not that there's this ideal on earth where there is no, this heaven on earth where it's like, everything is hunky dory and everything is kind of ideal and things go our way all the time and we're blissed out. It's not that.
not that. Let's rule that out really quickly. I agree.
And it's also not the fact that it's also not that we're not in tune with the suffering and the injustices. I mean, kind of going back to the theme of the topic for today, and the many experiences that we experience as humans that can be painful and traumatic and unhelpful. So to me, it's not that either, right? It's neither one of those sort of extremes. But what it is to me is that every little thing and big thing, but everything, kind of no matter what, if allowed, can be seen as a miracle. Every little thing on earth, can be seen as a miracle. And that it's what I bring to the situation. It's my attitude and my response to any situation that really makes it heaven, right? That makes it heaven. So, yeah, it's to me, it's about relating, I think, relating heavenly to earthly things. It's bringing that spirit of heaven to everything.
Luisa. Yeah.
Mm.
I think we're going to, yes, why don't we take a breath together? Let's just take a breath. It's bringing heavenly experience to earthly things. So let's just take a breath on that, Luisa. Just want to thank you. I feel such deep love for you. You are one of my great love stories. I forgot to say you're my son's godmother.
Yeah.
Isn't that
And that our sons were
incredible?
born around the same time.
Our sons
Our
were
sons
born
were
around the same
same.
time. And so it's
Yeah.
really, we have really traveled together. And I just want to thank you. This feels like it's so perfect, even though we've done a ton of earthly work together to come in and be here. And
Yes.
I will, if you are open to it, would love to have you back on and we could just choose a topic, right? A topic and discuss it
I
like we have today.
I would love it. I would
Would
love it.
you?
This has been really sweet, Claudia. Thank you for nudging me a bit. And it's been just really, really a wonderful experience for me. And I hope it has served. I really do. I hope it has
Yes.
served listeners and
Yes.
and the folks that you are in your world, that you are really trying to help and serve and are helping and serving.
Yes. Yes. And please share it with your folks. Please share it with your folks. Like the idea here is that we want all of this messaging to get out right now as the walking in the field, in the harvested field, while we're watching what's happening around us. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so
Yes. Yes.
much.
Dear.
Okay.
Thank you.
We will see you
Blessings.
again. Okay. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.